Hi, my name is Tony Zaya, and I'm recording this video for the parents out there that probably went through the stuff we're going through with our son that was having a lot of seizures. And we took him to the hospital, and the doctors couldn't do nothing. They gave him phenobarbital, all kind of medicine. He was having like 30 seizures a day, and steroids, all kind of shots, different kind of medicine. And Anthony became 3 years old, and the medication was just making him like a zombie. It was just, the doctors would recommend it because there's so much money involved. There was no other way. They said that's just medication. So Anthony today is 10 years old. He's seizure free for about 6 years after my wife did the ketogenic diet. One day I came home from work. I run a pizzeria, and I came home from work, and my wife said that she found something for Anthony. And after all the tears, and it's hard when you got a son like that, and she said that she might stop his seizures with this stuff. So we asked the doctors about it. The doctors will never recommend it. The neurologists wouldn't recommend it because they can't make money with eggs and bacon and butter, and so it's called the ketogenic diet. High fat, low carb. Has to be measured perfectly. So my wife tried it. Now don't forget, Anthony was having 30 spasms a day. Infantile spasms. It was terrible. He wouldn't stop crying. We knew something was wrong. Anthony's diagnosed with periventricular leukomalacia. It's a brain matter disease. But since, today, the doctors told us Anthony wouldn't do nothing. He'd be like a dead vegetable. Nothing. But if it wasn't for my wife finding out this ketogenic diet video or book she read at the library, and then she did some more studying, and I said, well, try it. Let's try it. It was incredible. We had a brain scan from the neurologist. Anthony's EEG was terrible. It was all over the place. When they showed us that's why Anthony cries. Things would trigger in his head and cause the spasms, and he would just cry and cry and cry and cry. And one day, my wife saw the book at the library, and then she discovered the video of famous actor, director. His son went through it. And I said, well, let's try it. So my wife, Sabrina, she tried it, and incredible.
It works when everything's measured.
It works when everything's measured perfectly. So there's classes for it. But like I said, the doctors won't recommend it. They'll recommend surgery. They'll recommend phenobarbital. If you tell a doctor that you want to do it, then they have to steer you the right way to do it. And that's what my wife did.
They send you to a dietitian.
They send you to a dietitian, and further, you'll do anything for your kid. She did it, and incredible. Anthony's seizures went away. So after 1 year, 2 years being on the diet, eating all this high fat, low carb, his seizures stopped. The second day, no more seizures.
Second day, the spasm went from 30 to 15.
It went from 30 to 15.
The fourth day was like 10.
10, and it kept on decreasing
but
until...
I kept him on the diet for 2 years because I was scared to get off of it.
Yeah, that's my wife in the background. So we're just doing this video to help all those parents out there that the doctors won't tell you about this ketogenic diet.
Eggs, bacon, heavy whipping cream, butter. Yeah. You can make soups. There's so many recipes that they can make.
Yeah.
As long as it's measured.
As long as it's measured right. And it worked. Anthony was seizure free. I couldn't believe it.
It's not easy to do this stuff, the cooking part. It's not easy, let me tell you. I used to buy 4 pots because of the measuring to make 4 cups of soup for 4 different meals. for breakfast,
Yeah.
for lunch, for
But
dinner.
she did it. She saved his life. I
It's
mean,
not easy, but it works. Put your mind to it and
today,
measure everything.
I have some videos on YouTube of Anthony, what he's doing, incredible stuff. I mean, after the 2 years, we took him back to do an EEG on his brain again. The doctor at Children's Memorial couldn't believe how his brain scan cleared up so much. It was normal. She asked us if she could use it for in her, she goes to meetings and student studies, and we said, yeah, sure. If we could help other families. I mean, Anthony still can't walk. He has his disease, but it's incredible. If he's happy little guy. He's alert. He'll eat by himself. I mean, he'll grab the food from your hand. I'll play the video. You can see his video.
He used to be on phenobarbital. He used to be on the steroid shots that were delivered to him. The steroid shots were $15,000 a month.
Yeah, so the doctors won't tell you about eggs and stuff because they want to make money.
Eggs and bacon and
it's a shame. It's a shame that the world we live in. It comes down to money before your kids. But I'm gonna play a video for all those parents out there that could see
what we watched.
What we watched, and you could search on. I'm sure all you parents, you'll do anything for your kids like I do anything for my son. I mean, I'm going to play it for you. It's the Charlie Foundation. So I'm going to play you the video so you can see it.
So what year was it? Cox was fired. The Yom Kippur War ended. And Midnight Train to Georgia was the hot single. It all happened the last week of October, 1973.
Here again is Stone Phillips.
What would you do if your child were desperately ill and no drug or medication seemed to work? You're about to meet a father who refused to give up, a man who defied the doctors and went looking for a miracle. Remarkably, he found one, and now, as John Larson reports, he wants to know why so many in the medical community kept it a secret.
Jim Abrams has made some of the most successful film comedies of the past decade. His hit movies include Airplane, Naked Gun, and Hot Shots. But the fun stopped for Jim Abrams just over a year ago. He was finishing his latest movie when suddenly his one-year-old son Charlie began having unexplained seizures.
On his first birthday, I was pushing him in a swing out in the front yard. And I noticed his head kind of went like that. He threw his arm up in the air.
Jim and his wife Nancy took Charlie to a neurologist who did a series of tests on Charlie's brain. The tests confirmed the doctor's suspicion. Little Charlie had epilepsy. But nothing prepared the Abrams for the nightmare to come. Charlie began having many more seizures.
Wow, seizure.
Sometimes he'd have 100 seizures a day.
Another seizure. That's
Sometimes Charlie would just go limp.
okay. That was a drop seizure.
Other times he'd shake.
Stiff as a board right now.
The worst kind of seizure.
Charlie. Charlie.
The Abrams brought Charlie to Dr. Donald Shields, a nationally recognized expert at UCLA, who tried to control Charlie's seizures with anticonvulsant drugs.
And then we lost control and just nothing was working. I think he probably had all of the available medications, and we were starting to look at some of the more experimental kinds of medications.
Even worse, Jim Abrams says the drugs had a terrible side effect. They were turning his son into a zombie.
You pour the drugs down the child's throat, your child's throat, despite the fact there's something inside you that says, wait a minute, this can't be right. Charlie was so loaded. At times he just lived in a car seat. He was so blotto from these drugs that he was essentially non-functional.
This little girl is about to have a bad epileptic seizure. Now, while you're watching her, consider this. New miracle drugs control these terrible seizures in most of the 750,000 children in this country who suffer from epilepsy. But for this little girl and 150,000 kids like her, drugs simply don't work. The Abrams feared Charlie was one of these most unfortunate children.
After the first drug, then there is only a 10 to 15% chance that the second drug will work, regardless of what that drug is. And the percentages drop from there.
Even more frightening, if left unchecked, these seizures can damage their brains, retarding these children forever. So the Abrams were racing against the clock. They had to stop Charlie's seizures before it was too late. They allowed doctors to operate on Charlie's brain, but the seizures continued. They even tried a faith healer, but that didn't work either.
This house was filled with tears, all of us, all the time. Cried. I mean, Charlie's brother and sister literally, for months, cried themselves to sleep at the foot of his crib because they just had some sort of instinct that they wanted to be near him.
His son was slipping away. His whole family was in anguish, and the doctors had no answers. Jim Abrams was desperate. He decided to begin his own study of epilepsy. He attended medical lectures and read every book he could find on epilepsy treatment. And one day, in a medical library, he found something no one had told him about. A book describing a diet that supposedly cured half of the epileptic kids who went on it.
And it was like dumbfounding. How could that possibly be?
The book claimed that experts here in Baltimore were perfecting something called the ketogenic diet, a diet consisting largely of something most doctors tell us to avoid: generous helpings of fat.
Against his own doctor's advice, Jim brought Charlie to Johns Hopkins Children's Center, where he found the man who wrote the book, Dr. John Freeman. At Johns Hopkins, Jim and Charlie also met a 72-year-old dietitian, Millicent Kelly, who had been working with the diet for 40 years.
So this is the one we use, even though this has a much better flavor.
Now retired and a part-time consultant, Millie had designed meals that give kids just enough protein to grow on, combined with lots of fat, bacon, butter, and heavy whipping cream. Their families have to measure every bite of every meal precisely, or Millie says the diet won't work.
Whatever happens there to cause that seizure just doesn't happen anymore. And they become seizure-free, and that's a remarkable thing.
Yet despite its high success rate, we found several parents who, like the Abrams, say their doctors also tried to talk them out of trying the diet.
We've been actively discouraged by different doctors not to try it. We have talked to many, many neurologists over the years, and they still feel that it's too much trouble.
Too much trouble? Ridiculous, says Nancy Abrams, Charlie's mom.
You know how hard it is to sit here and watch him disconnect from the rest of the family and the world and fade out? I mean, that's a lot harder to sit and watch a kid seize than it is to do this diet.
60 years ago, the diet was much more widely used after first being developed here at Johns Hopkins in the 1920s. But then, in the 40s and 50s, several new wonder drugs came on the market.
The drug companies made millions of dollars of profits, and doctors stopped using the diet. But all along, Millicent Kelly here at Johns Hopkins and a handful of others kept refining the diet, and there were some real success stories. Be ready!
Doug Foster is one of them. Today he enjoys a healthy life, including coaching his son's Little League ball team in Virginia Beach, Virginia. But 32 years ago, Doug's prospects looked grim. His constant uncontrollable seizures meant he had to wear a football helmet all day to protect him from sudden falls. But in 1962, Doug's parents put him on the ketogenic diet, and after 2 years, he was fine, seizure-free. And Doug had no negative side effects from eating all that fat.
I suppose if I hadn't found the diet, I would be in an institution. I would be wearing a football helmet, maybe strapped to a wheelchair so I couldn't fall out of the wheelchair and hurt myself. I don't know. I certainly wouldn't be married with 3 beautiful children, with a regular full-time job and a college degree and the whole shooting match.
Finally, it was Charlie's turn to try Millie's diet. He was taken off all medications and fed mostly fats. His father says it was a miracle.
His seizures started to diminish immediately. I mean, it was pretty dramatic. You could hold him and you could kind of feel him be less intense. And within a couple days, he stopped having seizures completely.
Sometimes there is truth in the old ways, even if we don't understand them.
Dr. John Freeman supervises the ketogenic diet at Johns Hopkins.
Do you fully understand how it works?
You have no clue how it works. And that's part of the reason it hasn't been accepted in lots of places.
But consider the results. Most kids who try the diet at Hopkins can go back to normal food after 2 years, never need drugs again, and remain seizure-free.
If I see results like I've been seeing, there's so many encouraging words talking to other parents that have been on the diet, and it works.
I'm coming to get you.
Jim and Charlie returned to Los Angeles, where Charlie thrived.
I'm coming. Here I come. Here I come. I'm coming. I'm coming to get you.
No longer a zombie on medications, his seizures were gone. But the story doesn't end here.
All of a sudden your eyes open up in the middle of the night and you say, well, wait a minute. This didn't have to happen. 90% of these seizures didn't have to occur. Waking up around the clock and pouring drugs down his throat didn't have to occur.
Jim was angry and puzzled that none of the 6 doctors he went to for help ever mentioned the diet.
What has stopped Charlie's seizures has been in existence for 70 years. It's been sitting there. It was waiting for him.
You had some knowledge that this diet was probably working back at Johns Hopkins, and yet you dissuaded the Abrams from attempting it. How come?
Well, because I don't think we had exhausted all of the medical approaches yet. There were actually still other medications that we hadn't tried yet.
Dr. Freeman tells us that 50 to 70% of the patients that come through his doors and get put on the diet have success. Can you think of any drugs in these hard cases that have 50 to 70% success rates?
Probably not anything that comes up to that level.
So why are modern doctors ignoring this diet? Charlie's own doctor has a surprising answer.
There's no big drug company behind the ketogenic diet, and there probably can never be unless somebody starts marketing sausage and eggs with cream sauce on it as a drug.
You're saying that, in a sense, one of the reasons that the ketogenic diet is not popular at this point is because there's not a big drug company behind it selling it to the doctors.
I think that's probably true. I hate to say that, but I think it's probably true.
It does not come in pill form. It cannot be administered with a scalpel. And the only people who profit from the ketogenic diet are the patients.
And incredibly, the diet could have been lost forever if Millie Kelly had not stuck with it for 4 decades, devoting even her retirement years to keeping a simple miracle cure alive.
Millie hadn't been around all these years, I think the diet would have been lost. Gone. That's how important she is.
Has anyone been invited to a party while they've been on this ketogenic diet?
And that's why Jim Abrams is making a new movie. Not a comedy this time, but a film for parents facing the crisis he faced, recording for future generations Millie's precise recipe for the diet that saved Charlie.
And your meat can be beef, lamb, veal, pork, liver, fish.
And since nobody else was doing it, Abrams personally took on the task of organizing a major medical conference on the diet last month. Doctors came from all over the country, even Dr. Donald Shields of UCLA, who last year had tried to talk Jim out of pursuing the diet, but now he's reconsidered.
If this is going to help a kid to have a chance for a more normal life, then I want to be able to use it.
2.5-year-old Charlie is doing well, but he's still not walking by himself like other kids his age.
But you're so cute.
But Jim Abrams still wonders if the months of pummeling from the seizures and the drugs did any permanent damage to Charlie's brain. And that thought keeps him angry.
how it could possibly be that that diet and its success rate at Johns Hopkins has remained a secret is absolutely incredible to me. And what really makes it tragic is the amount of kids who have suffered because of that.
No.
Since we shot this story, Charlie is now walking across the room by himself and talking in complete sentences. In the meantime, his father has set up a foundation to help spread the word about the ketogenic diet.
Well, that was it. I hope everything, you guys seen this video, and hopefully we could stop your kids' seizures. We could at least try. Thank you for watching our video.